never thought that a voice I taught to say, "Mama," would one day speak to me like a debt collector. The phone crackled against my ear, smelling faintly of lemon cleaner from my freshly wiped counter, as if the kitchen itself held its breath. "If you won't pay for the wedding, then you're not welcome," my son said, cold, clipped, like scissors through ribbon. I steadied my hand around my chipped chamomile mug, the one with tiny blue cornflowers, and felt the heat kiss my palm as if to remind me I was still here, still solid. Without thinking, I rubbed the edge of my cardigan's cuff between forefinger and thumb, a silly habit from my secretarial days, smoothing wrinkles no one else could see. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator and the slow, stubborn tick of the wall clock, each second a pebble thrown into a still pond. His words kept rippling. Their house, the venue, the vision, all of it framed like glossy magazine pages I was expected to underwrite. Through the window, sunlight fell across the kitchen table and lit up my small silver locket, resting by the sugar bowl, my late husband's picture inside, his smile a quiet lighthouse. I touched the locket, cool as a winter coin, as though he might tap back from the other side and tell me what to say. Instead I tasted chamomile, apple sweet, grassy, finding its way down a throat that had suddenly forgotten how to swallow. "I've saved for my old age," I managed, gentle but firm, the way you hold a bird without breaking its wings. "I'll give you something, within reason, but I won't empty my life into a single night." The kitchen smelled of toast crumbs and the citrus polish I always use on Fridays. Ritual can be an anchor. His breath on the line went thin. Papers rustled, the sound of judgment being stapled together. "Then don't come," he said, as if he were trimming me from a family photograph. My fingers circled the rim of the cup, once, twice, 3 times, my small prayer against panic. After the call ended, the house felt like a church after a funeral, flowers, quiet, and the ache of all the words no one knew how to say. The afternoon breeze pushed the lace curtain, and the fabric brushed my arm, ghost light, like a blessing or a warning. I sat, spine straight the way my mother taught me, and opened my notepad, the old stenographer's kind with a stiff cardboard back. The pencil smelled like cedar as I wrote 3 lines: rent, utilities, groceries. Underneath, I added one more word: dignity. I underlined it twice. Somewhere a delivery truck rattled by. Life carries on, even when your heart is staging a sit-in. I brewed a second cup because the first had turned to a tremor. Steam rose in pale ribbons, and I let it bathe my face, hot, clean, forgiving. The mug's handle had a hairline crack I traced with my thumb, a tiny lightning bolt of imperfection that somehow made it dearer. Funny, isn't it? We love things more when they've survived a drop. I thought of my boy at 5, cheeks sticky with jelly, clutching the cheap plastic dinosaur I'd rescued from the bargain bin. He'd slept with it for a week, roaring softly in his dreams. Memory has a taste, like sugar left too long on the tongue. By evening, the sky was a bruise above the rooftops, and I could hear Mrs. Patel watering her marigolds next door, the hose hissing like a sigh. I rested my pearls around my neck for comfort, cool little moons settling against warm skin. My husband gave them to me on our 25th anniversary with hands that smelled faintly of motor oil and peppermint gum. I reached up and rolled one pearl between finger and thumb, my worry bead, my metronome, until the rhythm slowed my pulse. On the table, my locket caught the last stripe of sun and returned it to the room, a quiet trick of light that felt like company. I wanted to cry, but at my age tears are expensive, they leave you puffy and headachy, and the world never refunds you for them. Instead, I wiped the counter again, lemons and elbow grease, because clean surfaces make a person brave. I folded the dish towel into a neat rectangle, edges kissing, and stacked it under the mug like a makeshift pedestal. A queen needs a throne, even a chipped ceramic one. The radio played some old Motown, the bass line warm as toast, and I found myself swaying in place, hips creaking a bit, the pearls tapping a soft rhythm against bone. When I finally sat, the chair's wooden seat pressed a familiar crescent into the back of my thighs, and the table left a faint, cool circle on my forearms. My notepad waited, patient as a cat. I wrote another line: boundaries are a love letter to yourself. The pencil scratched, small thunder on paper. I could almost hear my husband's voice, low and amused. Look at you, general of the kitchen, planning a campaign. Maybe I am. The scent of chamomile drifted up again, and I took a long sip, tasting steadiness. I wish I could tell you my heart didn't splinter at being uninvited to my own son's joy. It did, clean through, like a popsicle stick snapped in two. But I also wish you could feel the surprising clarity that comes after the break, the way cold water wakes the skin. I pressed the pearls once more, felt their round certainty, and closed the locket over my husband's smile with a soft click. Somewhere in the house, a floorboard gave its habitual groan, the old timbers negotiating with time. So be it. The night settled on the sill like a cat, and I let it stay. I rinsed the cup, the warm water running over my hands like a small benediction, and hung the dish towel just so. Ritual, again. It's how you lay track in front of a moving train. I turned off the radio, and the silence was not empty, it was upholstered like a good chair. Before bed, I placed the notepad on the nightstand beside my reading glasses and a tiny bottle of lavender oil. I dabbed a bit on my wrist, earthy, floral, and breathed in until my shoulders dropped. In the dim, the pearls glowed faintly, a constellation around an ordinary woman's neck. Tomorrow, I told myself, I will make tea, and I will call no one. I will listen for what my own bones have to say. The clock ticked its even promise. I smoothed the hem of my cardigan one last time and climbed under the quilt my mother stitched, patches of old dresses holding hands. Sleep came, smelling like linen and leaf shadow. And as it folded me in, I knew this was only the first note in a longer song. The next verse, I suspected, would not be kind. A week later, the silence had settled into the house like a fog you can taste. It tasted faintly metallic, like water from old pipes, and carried the musty weight of unopened curtains. My phone, usually a buzzing little nuisance on the counter, lay flat and mute beside my notepad, its screen black as a closed door. My calls to my son went unanswered. My texts, carefully worded and sometimes rewritten twice before sending, remained marked with that cold, unblinking, delivered, but never, read. Even my granddaughter's sweet face, her gap-toothed grin and those messy braids, vanished from my life like smoke slipping through a crack. I tried not to pace, but the creak of the hallway boards betrayed me. I'd find myself at the window, cardigan sleeves pushed up just far enough for the knit to leave faint ridges on my forearms. The smell of overripe bananas on the counter turned my stomach, so I mashed them into batter and baked a loaf. The oven's heat breathed into the kitchen, warm and yeasty, but it couldn't chase away the draft of being shut out. I wouldn't have known when or where the wedding had taken place if it weren't for Carol. She arrived one afternoon without calling first, her coat smelling faintly of rain and her umbrella dripping onto my welcome mat. She perched on the edge of my sofa like a messenger carrying bad news, and her fingers tapped the handle of her handbag in a restless rhythm. "You should see this," she said, handing me her tablet. The screen glowed with photographs. My son, in a tuxedo that looked like it had been poured onto him, grinning beside his bride, whose gown glimmered like fresh snow under lights. Gold-plated table settings, centerpieces bursting with orchids, and there, in the center of one frame, an ice sculpture of two swans whose necks curved into a perfect heart. I could almost hear the clink of champagne glasses, smell the sugar glaze from the towering cake behind them. It took me a moment to realize the ache in my chest wasn't just from being excluded, it was from understanding. This was the wedding I had been expected to fund. Not a family gathering with warmth and laughter, but a stage production, an event designed to impress. The pearls at my throat felt heavier, their cool touch almost accusatory. I rolled one between my fingers, a habit I'd picked up whenever I needed to think clearly. I set the tablet on the coffee table, the wood cool against my fingertips, and smoothed the front of my cardigan. "Well," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "it appears I've been spared the inconvenience of freezing in a rented ballroom." Carol tried to smile, but her eyes were soft with pity. I've never been fond of pity, it's like being offered tea that's gone cold. That evening, I poured myself a small glass of sherry and sat at the kitchen table under the dim halo of the pendant lamp. The smell of banana bread lingered, sweet and almost cloying. I cut a slice, butter melting into the warm crumb, but each bite turned to paste in my mouth. I wrote in my notepad again, my pencil scratching out words like a surgeon making incisions. Loss without death feels heavier than loss with it. I imagined the sound of my granddaughter's laugh, the weight of her small hand in mine, the scent of strawberry shampoo in her hair. That memory pulsed against my ribs like a bruise you forget about until you bump it. I told myself she was too young to understand, that she hadn't chosen this. Still, the thought of her growing up without me at her side was a splinter I couldn't dig out. Before bed, I polished my locket until it caught the lamplight. My husband's picture looked back at me with that same calm steadiness that had once talked me through mortgage papers and medical scares. "Well, love," I whispered to the cool metal, "apparently, I'm the villain in my own family's fairy tale." I clicked it shut and set it beside my glasses. The next day would bring no apology, I knew. The silence was too deliberate now, too curated. But as I lay under my quilt, the faint lavender scent from last night's dab still on my wrist, I decided I'd keep my spine straight. They might try to erase me from the photographs, but they wouldn't take my dignity from the frame. And something, call it instinct, told me this story wasn't done with me yet. I learned the hard math of love. Generosity without boundaries invites wolves, and my savings became their scent trail. When I was 25 and still ironing collars for courage, the apartment smelled of fresh coffee and wet wool. My husband came home with his hands slicked in motor oil, dropped a bundle of unopened bills on the table, and kissed my forehead like a signature scrawled in haste. I turned each envelope over, the paper whispering, while I smoothed the linen tablecloth flat with the heel of my palm, left, right, left, pretending order could be pressed into debt. Beside me sat the green ceramic sugar bowl with its chipped lid, our small kingdom's treasure chest, and I told myself good intentions would be legal tender by morning. Years later, after the layoff and before the diagnosis, our kitchen took on the smell of lemon cleanser and burnt toast. Poverty has a way of overcooking everything. I kept a stenographer's notepad like a shield, the cardboard back sturdy as a vow, and listed every coin with my cedar-scented pencil: rent, utilities, groceries. Each time fear rose, I touched my locket, cool, oval, dependable, and rolled it between finger and thumb until thought caught up with breath. That was the season one learned to tuck a $10 bill behind the flour tin, the way sailors tuck letters inside jackets. You hope you won't need it, but storms are stubborn. There was a day at the pharmacy I still taste like aspirin. The pharmacist lowered his voice, then lowered it again, as if shame should be paid for in installments. "Your card declined," he said, and a woman in line pretended not to hear while her perfume, gardenia, too sweet, muscled into my air. I smoothed the hem of my cardigan until the knit left a row of little valleys on my wrist and pulled the emergency bill from my wallet, folded so long it had a crease like a scar. The paper crackled with the sound of being rescued. I went home and underlined, "Never again," in my notepad, twice. When he got sick, the house smelled of broth and cotton, and the soft tick of the humidifier became our metronome. I wore the pearls he'd given me on our 25th, cool little moons against the heat of grief, and rolled one bead gently whenever the pain clerked at our door. Collections called at dinner time, their voices syruped in civility. "Ma'am, we can help you consolidate." I learned to stack their promises like playing cards and blow them down with 2 words, in writing. Each refusal felt like sanding splinters from a railing. I could finally hold on without bleeding. By the time I signed the last hospital form, my fingers smelled of ink and Purell, and the pen left a shallow dent where a ring used to sit. I kept my husband's jacket on the back of the kitchen chair, the wool scratchy, the pocket still holding a peppermint, like a flag planted in a territory we were not leaving. After the funeral, casseroles arrived in rivulets of sympathy. I lined the lids on the counter so their handles pointed east, a silly sailor's superstition that made the room feel navigable. When I told my son we would not be selling the house, he shrugged, young and ferocious with possibility, and I rolled a pearl to steady my yes. My son learned early that I was the doer, the finder, the extender of deadlines. "Mom, can I borrow?" started as quarters for soda and became, through the alchemy of habit, something more elastic. In high school he brought home a class trip form that smelled vaguely of copier toner. I wrote the check, tapping the paper's corner until the ink dried. In college it was just the fees, and later, when his first startup fizzled like a damp match, I offered what I called a bridge and what he quietly named a dock. Each time, I folded the kitchen towel into a perfect rectangle, edges meeting, corners squared, as if geometry could bless generosity. Then came the fiancé, all bright laugh and champagne perfume, her bracelets chiming like tiny cash registers. She had a way of appraising rooms as if they were inventory, curtains, china, me. The first dinner we shared smelled of rosemary chicken and new paint. She'd insisted on refreshing their rental with an accent wall for the vibe. I set my locket just beside my water glass, a small anchor in a tide of adjectives. Statement, bespoke, once in a lifetime. When she said her parents had already leveraged the house twice to support the vision, I felt the air thin. I smoothed my napkin over my knees, 1, 2, 3, so my voice would arrive calm when I offered a modest gift instead of a blank check. The hints hardened. A catalog arrived at my door, gowns that looked like snowfall, napkins named after birds, scented faintly with vanilla ink, the kind that tries to taste like safety. My son laughed at the prices, then didn't laugh. "It's the standard now," he said, drumming his fingers on my table the way he used to drum a toy truck across the floorboards. I slid the notepad toward me and drew a single line down the center, a border, visible if you wanted to see it, and listed what I could give on one side, what I would not on the other. The pearls clicked softly as I nodded, my little metronome of resolve. If you're wondering whether I feared being called stingy, I did, the way one fears being called old, not for the truth in it, but for the lazy cruelty. I baked a lemon cake and carried it to their place, the pan warm through the towel, sugar zesting the air with brightness. "This is what I can do," I said, tapping the envelope once on their counter so it made a clean, declarative sound. My son's eyes slid to his fiancée, then back to me, and I counted my breaths the way nurses do, 4 in, 6 out, while I smoothed the towel's edge as if it were a skirt. Here is what experience taught me, and what I wrote in capital letters on my notepad that night, the pencil smell sharp as pine. Love provides, fear indulges. The locket clicked shut on his photo like a tiny door I could still lock. I rolled a pearl, tasted the bitterness of overbrewed tea, and decided I would not finance anyone's fantasy at the price of my winter. By morning, the kitchen smelled of calm, the quiet, lemon-scrubbed kind, and the lace curtain brushed my forearm with that familiar, feathery assurance. I placed the notepad beside the sugar bowl and tapped it twice. The wolves would circle, that is their nature. But I, too, have a nature. And soon, sooner than anyone guessed, it would be tested in public, under bright lights and polished cutlery. 2 months later, the silence broke, not with an apology, but with a voice that carried the soft hum of possibility. It was a Tuesday, the kind of gray, slanted light day that smells faintly of damp pavement and cold tea left too long in the cup. I was folding laundry at the kitchen table, towels stacked like obedient soldiers, my pearls swinging lightly as I reached for the next piece, when the phone rang. My fingers froze on a faded dishcloth. I smoothed its frayed edge, once, twice, before answering. "Mom," my son's voice said, softer than before, no edge, no rush. I could almost see him leaning against something, fiddling with the seam of his pocket. "Let's have dinner. Just us. Let's make peace." The words tumbled into the air between us, smelling faintly of hope, like fresh bread still in the oven. I didn't let my breath hitch. Instead, I rolled one pearl between my fingers, cool and grounding. "All right," I said, my voice steady but not cold. Inside me, something small, something I thought had curled up and gone still, stirred. In my mind, I could already picture it. The two of us seated across a warm table, maybe the clink of coffee cups, the low hum of restaurant chatter, a conversation that might stitch back a frayed seam. I imagined the relief in his eyes when he realized a wedding wasn't worth losing family. My shoulders loosened as I folded the last towel into a perfect square. "Where?" I asked, trying to sound casual, as though my heartbeat hadn't just tripped over itself. "Downtown," he said, "the new Italian place, La Rosetta. Let's keep it simple. And, come alone. It'll be better that way." His voice carried the faint echo of a smile, but it also held something unreadable. I brushed my thumb over the handle of my chamomile cup, still warm from earlier. "Just us," I repeated, letting the words settle like steam rising from the tea. After hanging up, I sat a while, the pearls cool against my neck, my locket pressing a gentle oval into my skin. I reached for my notepad, the cardboard back familiar against my palm, and wrote one word: possibility. I underlined it once. The kitchen smelled faintly of the lemon polish I'd used that morning, and I let that scent mingle with the brewing excitement. Outside, the wind nudged the lace curtain, brushing it lightly against my wrist, a soft reminder of change. The last time we'd spoken, his words had been a blade, now they were more like a key. Whether they opened a door or a trap, I couldn't yet tell. That evening, I baked a small apple tart, the cinnamon curling into the air like a promise. I wrapped it tightly in foil and set it aside, not for him, but for Carol. She'd been my constant sounding board through this silent standoff, and I knew she'd want to hear the news in person. The oven's fading heat warmed the kitchen, but I noticed I was still rubbing the edge of my cardigan, slow and thoughtful, as if smoothing out creases in my own resolve. When I finally climbed into bed, the quilt's weight pressed me into the mattress, a steadying hand. I could almost hear my husband's voice, low and amused: "Careful, love. Sometimes peace talks are just new battles in better lighting." I clicked the locket shut over his picture and rolled one pearl until sleep found me. The next day, I'd call Carol. I'd tell her about the invitation, about the way my son's voice had sounded, how it had reached past the hurt, if only for a moment. I'd tell her I felt, maybe not hopeful, but open. Still, as I set my notepad on the nightstand, my pencil resting neatly across its spine, I wrote a second word beneath: possibility, caution. Then I turned off the light, letting the dark settle around me like an unspoken question. He chose an upscale place downtown, far from home, and insisted I come alone, an invitation that sounded like a velvet glove hiding something sharper. The name, La Rosetta, tasted expensive even before I looked it up, like a chocolate with too much gold foil. I could smell the faint citrus from the lemon oil I'd rubbed into my table that morning as I traced the restaurant's address on my notepad, the cardboard back firm against my palm. My old habit kicked in. I smoothed the cuff of my cardigan, 1, 2, 3, then underlined the street name as if ink could make distance safer. The pearls at my neck lay cool and obedient, little moons listening for tides. I called the number, and the hostess answered with a smile I could hear, bright, rehearsed, a glass bell in a tiled room. Behind her voice hummed the clatter of plates and a steamy waft that I imagined smelled of garlic and new money. "Table for two," I said, rolling a pearl between finger and thumb to steady the wobble in my tone. Under my son's name. There was a pause, paper rustling, then a lilt. "Yes, ma'am, private booth, 7 p.m., private." The word stuck like a fishbone. I tapped the pencil twice on my notepad, a metronome for thoughts I wasn't ready to play out loud. The map app showed a neat blue line sluicing through the city like a ribbon I was meant to follow. I traced it with my nail and felt the grit of the screen protector snag, small, irritating, real. Why downtown? My son hates paying for parking. I could almost smell the hot breath of the asphalt, taste that metallic tang the air gets when traffic holds its own funeral. I closed the locket over my husband's picture with a soft click, our little ritual of counsel, and heard his voice in memory. "If they change the terrain, check the weather." My weather smelled like rain on penny-colored leaves, pretty but slick. I set out my navy cardigan and the pearl studs to match, then laid my notepad atop them like a quiet chaperone. The wool of the sweater brushed my wrist, familiar as a lullaby, while I smoothed its hem, a tick I wear like a bracelet. I brewed chamomile, the apple sweet steam forgiving me for being nervous, and placed the cup beside the green sugar bowl with the chipped lid, my small shrine to steadiness. On the pad I wrote 3 lines. Why alone? Why there? What's the cost? The pencil's cedar smell braided with the tea until the room felt like an old book, comforting, but full of warnings. To distract myself, I polished my shoes, the paste smelling faintly of cold cream and attic dust. The leather gave back a shy light, and I rubbed the toe in small circles the way I used to coax shine from my husband's work boots on Sunday nights. In the hallway the floorboard gave its habitual groan, our house's way of clearing its throat. "I hear you," I said to the wood, and smiled at my own foolishness. I pinched a pearl, let it slide, and listened to its tiny click against the next, like 2 thoughts conferring in secret. Evening shaded the kitchen windows with that purple-gray wash that makes everything look like a memory. I opened the fridge and caught the butter's sweet chill. I wasn't hungry, but I cut a slice of leftover tart anyway and tasted cinnamon, trying to be brave. I was halfway through the plate when I realized my hand had been smoothing the same square of cardigan for minutes, as if I could iron suspicion flat. I set down the fork, rinsed the plate, the water warm as a benediction, and watched the swirl down the drain, a silver coin spinning, then gone. A thought flickered, quick, moth-like. He said, "Better that way." Better for whom? The word left a chalky taste. I reached for my locket again, thumb finding the smooth oval, and pictured my granddaughter's milk-tooth grin. The image carried the faint scent of strawberry shampoo and crayons. It steadied me, then sharpened me. I do not walk blind into rooms where my name might be misspelled on purpose. I tapped the pencil on the pad, 1, 2, 3, then drew a small star beside the questions. Stars are for navigation. I stood at the sink, feeling the cool porcelain under my palms, and practiced my hello the way I used to rehearse office scripts. Pleasant, anchored, not for sale. The kitchen smelled of lemon and faint lavender from last night's wrist dab, a peaceable treaty of scents. Still, caution pricked like a row of hidden pins. I rolled a pearl once more and decided that if the terrain changes, you don't only check the weather, you ring a lighthouse. I wiped the counter a final time, the cloth damp, the pattern of its weave pressing a gentle grid into my fingertips, and glanced at the clock. There was space between now and 7 p.m., a small pocket of breathable air. I set the notepad square to the table's edge, the way my old boss liked his memos, and reached for the phone. The line between intrigue and trap is thin as a hair. Best to examine it with steady hands. Tomorrow's dinner might be redemption, I told myself. Then again, silk can hide rope. Either way, light helps. I dialed Carol, already tasting the peppermint tea she favors and the plainspoken truth that comes with it. If this invitation was a glove, we'd find out what it was hiding before I slipped my hand inside. Before stepping into a situation that smelled faintly of trouble, I knew better than to go in without a second opinion. Carol answered on the second ring, her voice wrapped in the warm scent of peppermint tea and freshly baked oat cookies. Though I knew I was only imagining the smells, they came through as clear as her words. "What's the matter, hun? You've got that, I'm calling for a reason, tone." I told her about the dinner. About the restaurant. About the request to come alone. As I spoke, I smoothed the hem of my cardigan, left, right, left, like I was folding truth into tidy pleats. She didn't interrupt, just listened, the way a nurse listens for the end of a cough. Then she exhaled in that low, knowing way of hers. "Sounds like a setup." The word made my skin prickle the way it does when you step outside and smell a storm before you see it. I stood at my kitchen counter, fingertips resting on the cool rim of my chamomile cup. "A setup for what, exactly?" I asked. "Could be anything," Carol said. "Could be nothing. But the words, just us and downtown, don't sit right together in my book. Keep your wits about you." I could hear her spoon stirring her tea, the faint clink of ceramic and silver. It reminded me of my mother's kitchen, where comfort always came with a sound. "I'm not naive," I told her, my voice firmer than I felt. "But if there's a chance this is an olive branch," she cut me off, gentle but sharp. "An olive branch still has a stick attached, and sticks can poke." That made me laugh, though the laugh caught in my throat like a crumb. She didn't leave it there. "Do me a favor. When you go, keep your phone on you. Charged. And if you need me, use the phrase we agreed on, bring me that book I lent you." I rolled one pearl between my fingers, letting the cool roundness anchor me. "All right," I said. "You'll be on call." "You bet. And if my gut's wrong, I'll buy you dessert to make up for doubting your boy." Her promise made me smile, though the air still felt heavy with the unspoken. After we hung up, I stood in the kitchen for a while, the smell of lemon polish still faint in the air from my morning cleaning. I tapped my notepad with the tip of my pencil, cedar scent rising as if the paper itself were thinking. I wrote down 2 words, watch closely. Underneath, I drew a small circle, a symbol I use when I mean full attention. The lace curtain brushed my arm as if it had been listening. I poured the last of my chamomile into my mouth, lukewarm now, and set the cup in the sink. The porcelain's cool touch reminded me that anticipation can chill you faster than fear. As I rinsed the cup, I felt the steady presence of my locket against my skin. I opened it for just a moment, my husband's smile offering that familiar quiet counsel. Better to know where the fire is before you smell smoke. I clicked it shut, rolled a pearl, and decided I'd go to the dinner, but I wouldn't go unarmed. My armor would be subtle. A charged phone, a plan with Carol, and a mind sharp enough to catch the glint of any hidden blade. The evening light shifted through the kitchen window, turning the steam from the sink into a silver veil. I reached for the dish towel, folded it square, and thought of Carol's words again, sticks can poke. And if there was a stick waiting for me at La Rosetta, I intended to see it before it saw me. I prepared as if for weather, layers of sense and steadiness, every item chosen to keep me warm where kindness might not. I started with the closet, where cardigans keep the smell of lavender sachets like old secrets. My navy one, soft as a well-told story, waited on its hanger, sleeves slightly creased in the place my fingers always smooth, left, left, before I wear it anywhere important. I laid it on the bedspread, its wool a deep lake against my mother's patchwork quilt, and set my pearls on top, small moons cooling the fabric. The locket, warmed by skin, clicked as I opened it, my husband's smile glinting under the lamplight like a lighthouse at dusk. In the bathroom, steam fogged the mirror, carrying the clean bite of mint from my toothpaste. I dabbed a dot of lotion on my wrists, almond and something citrusy, and traced the lines there, roads I've traveled longer than any map admits. Back in the bedroom, I smoothed the hem of the cardigan again and fastened the pearls, one bead rolled between finger and thumb until the necklace settled into its rightful rhythm. Habit is armor. Our small repetitions are stitches that keep the fabric from splitting. On the dresser, my notepad waited, cardboard back sturdy as a promise. I wrote the date and the address with my cedar-scented pencil, the shavings in the little tray smelling faintly like a winter workshop. Beneath the address, 3 bullets: be cordial, ask questions, sign nothing. I underlined the last twice, the graphite leaving a soft shine like a bruise that knows its own name. The pencil tapped the pad, 1, 2, 3, my metronome of resolve. The kitchen carried the day's lemon polish and the friendly ghost of coffee. I boiled water and steeped chamomile until the steam lifted in pale ribbons, the mug's rim warming my lip with a small, maternal kiss. Beside the cup, I placed the green sugar bowl with its chipped lid, our little relic of perseverance, and set my phone to charge. The cord clicked in, the battery icon filled like a calm tide. I slipped a portable charger into my purse too, the leather smelling faintly of closet cedar and old subway rides. Redundancy is dignity in practical footwear. I chose shoes I could stand in, polished, low-heeled, trustworthy. The polish smelled like attic dust and raincoats. It crept under my nails and made me think of Sunday nights with my husband's boots braced on yesterday's newspaper. I buffed in circles until they held a soft glow, then lined them with the thin insoles I favor, little quilts for the soles. Before slipping them on, I pressed the pearls once more, bead to bead, like counting prayers I've kept in storage. My handbag was a small, sensible ship. Into it, I placed the notepad, a good pen that clicks loudly enough to punctuate a sentence, and my reading glasses in their cracked leather case. I added a peppermint, sharp comfort for a dry mouth, and a travel-sized lavender bottle whose scent can talk down a stampede. At the last second, I tucked in a copy of my power of attorney papers, the real ones, notarized, smelling faintly of ink and courthouse marble, because insurance works best in the dark, unseen but present. I zipped the purse with a sound that always reminds me of a saw finishing the last tooth of a cut, clean, final. Dusk sifted through the lace curtain and brushed my forearm with its cool net, a shiver that asked, "Ready?" I rinsed the chamomile cup and set it on the dish towel, folding the cloth into a neat rectangle so the edges met like two sane people agreeing. My phone buzzed, a calendar reminder chiming with an almost cheerful stupidity, and I silenced it, then checked. Carol on speed dial, Cousin Frank's number starred. I tapped the screen twice, a little drumroll of preparedness, and slipped the phone into the inside pocket where it rests against my heartbeat. Before leaving, I stood in the doorway and looked at the room the way you look at a face you've loved for decades, cataloging its ordinary miracles. The lemon-sheened counter, the sugar bowl's chip, the chair that holds my husband's jacket when memory gets heavy. I touched the locket, cool again, and felt the oval settle under my collarbone like a coin paid to a ferryman I do not intend to meet tonight. Watch my back, I told the empty room, and the house answered with its familiar floorboard groan, old wood promising to keep its counsel. Outside, the air had that city evening taste, metal, rain not yet decided, a whisper of bakery sugar from 3 blocks over. I locked the door, key turning with a practiced clack, and slid the ring back into my purse, metal cool as a yes. At the curb, the car's interior smelled faintly of last month's orange peel, a private sunshine I keep for bad weather. I sat, palms on the wheel, smoothing the leather seam under my thumbs, left, left, until my shoulders dropped from my ears. The engine hummed. Headlights wrote pale ladders on the street. In the rear view, my pearls shone like a sensible constellation. I decided to follow them, one bead at a time, into whatever this dinner thought it was. I tasted peppermint to steady the breath, clicked the locket closed with that soft, faithful sound, and pulled into traffic, a small ship choosing its channel. La Rosetta would be all warm lighting and practiced smiles, I knew, the kind of place where napkins are heavy and questions are light. That's fine. I was bringing my own weight, a notepad, a backbone, and the quiet bravery of a woman who has paid her bills and buried her dead. The road unspooled, smooth as ribbon over bone, and somewhere ahead, under polished cutlery and someone else's music, the test waited with its patient grin. I rolled a pearl, felt its round certainty, and aimed my ship for the glow. If this was weather, I was dressed for it, and if it was a storm, well, I have learned how to read the clouds. When I arrived at La Rosetta, the night air still carried a faint scent of rain on asphalt, mingled with the sweeter perfume of fresh bread spilling out the open doorway. Inside, warm amber lighting pooled on polished wood tables, and the air was thick with garlic, basil, and the low murmur of well-dressed people saying things they wanted overheard. I smoothed the cuff of my navy cardigan, left, left, while my eyes swept the room for my son. Instead, a man in a charcoal suit sat at a corner booth, a legal pad on the table in front of him. He stood as I approached, his handshake cool and dry, smelling faintly of expensive aftershave that reminded me of elevator rides in tall buildings. "Mrs. Whitman," he said, his voice as even as his tie. "I'm Mr. Douglas, your son's attorney." I paused, one hand on the back of the booth, my locket pressing a cold, oval question into my skin. I thought I was meeting my son. "You are," he said, gesturing for me to sit. And there he was, my son, sliding into the booth from the opposite side. He didn't meet my eyes, instead smoothing the crease of his sleeve, an old tell from his childhood when he was about to ask for something big. The waiter arrived with water, the glasses sweating onto small white napkins, the citrus slice floating like a warning flag. I sipped mine slowly, tasting nothing but the faint metallic tang of my own nerves. Then my son said it, flat as a stone dropped in still water. "Sign these papers, or you'll never see your granddaughter again." The words seemed to change the air itself, thicker, harder to breathe. I rolled one pearl between finger and thumb, its coolness keeping my hands steady. The papers lay on the table, their crisp edges slicing the candlelight. Mr. Douglas adjusted them so they faced me, his pen placed neatly across the top sheet like a blade sheathed in ink. "What are they?" I asked, my voice even, almost curious. "Power of attorney," the lawyer replied. "Transfer of certain assets. An agreement not to contest changes to your will." His tone was polite enough to make the venom harder to spot. I looked at my son then, really looked, at the line between his brows, the way his jaw clenched, how his eyes stayed fixed on the table. The smell of roasted rosemary chicken drifted from a nearby table, absurd in its normalcy. I placed my hands flat on the tablecloth, feeling the linen's fine weave under my palms. "Interesting," I said, as if he'd offered me a menu I might consider. I picked up my water glass, cool against my fingertips, and took another slow sip. In the silence that followed, the waiter returned to take our order, and my son waved him away with a small, impatient gesture. That same hand had once held mine crossing busy streets, sticky with lollipop sugar. I set the glass down and smoothed the hem of my cardigan again, left, left, keeping my movements calm, measured. The lace of my self-control felt delicate in that moment, but it was tightly woven. The lawyer slid the pen toward me. "We can make this easy," he said. I smiled faintly, a smile I'd learned from years of deflecting salesmen and charity gala sharks. "Oh, I like easy," I said lightly. "But I also like to read the fine print, twice." The candle between us flickered, its light catching the edge of the pen, and for the first time that night, I felt the slow, deliberate settling of something inside me. This was not just dinner. This was an ambush served on linen with a side of betrayal. I touched the locket at my throat, the oval cool and sure. My husband's silent smile steadied me. And I knew, in that moment, that the rest of the night would not go the way they planned. I smiled, asked calm questions, and bought time the way a seamstress buys inches, with tiny, precise stitches no one notices until the dress fits me. I kept my hands steady on the linen, feeling the fine grain under my palms like snow pressed flat, and rolled a single pearl between finger and thumb, the cool rhythm that keeps my voice from shaking. "Power of attorney," I repeated, letting the phrase melt on my tongue like a lozenge I didn't intend to swallow. Garlic and basil swirled in the air. From the bar came the faint orange peel scent of someone's Negroni. "Lovely stationery," I added, tracing the watermark with my nail. "Mind if I read every word?" The lawyer's pen paused mid-air. My son exhaled, impatient, the candle wobbling in his breeze. I reached into my handbag, leather warm from my lap, and drew out my reading glasses and notepad, the cardboard back firm as backbone. The pencil's cedar smell met the restaurant's buttered air, an odd, bracing duet. I smoothed the hem of my cardigan, left, right, left, then wrote the date, the place, and 2 tidy headings. What they say, what it means. "To help me think," I said mildly. The lawyer's smile thinned, a ribbon pulled too tight. The paper edges nipped my fingertips as I flipped the stack. A small bite is still a warning. "Before we proceed," I said, "I'll need your card." I held out my hand, palm steady, locket cool against my skin like a coin I wasn't spending. Mr. Douglas slid a rectangle across the table. I read it aloud, name, firm, clear enough that the couple in the next booth glanced over. The room smelled suddenly of roasted rosemary chicken and curiosity. "And just for clarity," I added, my pencil tapping twice, "you're advising my son, not me." "Correct," he said. "Splendid," I replied. "Then you won't mind if I seek independent counsel." The pearl clicked softly against its neighbor, my private applause. The waiter hovered, towel over forearm, the lemon wedge on his water tray perfuming the air like a small, bright truth. "We'll need a moment," I told him, smiling. "But do bring bread." I said bread the way some people say witness. When it arrived, warm and yeasty, I tore a piece slowly, feeling the steam kiss my fingertips, the crust scratch my thumb. Sensations that tether a person to herself when the world tries to lift her by the ankles. I let the butter soften on the plate, then spread a thin, reasonable layer. Appetite is a kind of defiance. "Page 4, I murmured, pencil poised. "This clause about irrevocable. That's a church word. Are we praying or signing?" The lawyer blinked. My son rubbed the crease of his sleeve, an old boyhood till I recognized the way a sailor recognizes a current by taste. "It's standard," the lawyer said. "So is tipping," I answered lightly, "and yet people still earn it." A chuckle escaped from the bar. I didn't look. Public isn't the same as spectacle. I smoothed my cuff again, left, left, and underlined irrevocable twice, the graphite leaving a silvered whisper. "Email me PDFs," I said at last, capping the pen I hadn't used. "I'll review with my attorney." I let attorney rest in the air like a lavender sachet in a drawer, small, soft, unmistakable. My locket pressed warm now, heat gathered from my own certainty. My son's eyes flicked up, then down. He reached for his water and knocked the lemon into the glass with a plop that smelled like surrender. "We were hoping to finalize tonight," the lawyer said. "Of course you were," I answered, voice gentle as folded linen. "But I never sign contracts in rooms that smell of garlic. It confuses the appetite." The attorney tried a different door. "We're concerned about your decision-making." I lifted my notepad so the candle lit its face and wrote, in careful capitals, "Alleged capacity issue, date, time, witnesses." Then, without theatrics, I turned slightly toward the room and said to the hovering waiter, "Would you mind printing the menu names on our bill? Helps me remember what I ordered." He nodded, eyes kind. I'd given him a reason to exist in this story beyond plates, and now he existed, present, observing, lemon and ink and all. Semi-public is sometimes safer than private. That's not paranoia, it's physics. I checked my phone, only the time, screen glow cool as a pond, and set it face up by the sugar-crusted panna cotta I had no intention of ordering. If anyone pressures me to sign tonight, I said evenly, I'll need that noted too. The lawyer's pen tapped, once, twice, my rhythm, stolen, and therefore mine still. My son muttered something about duty, the word tasted of cold coins and old sermons. I sipped water, the ice numbing my teeth into silence until my better speech returned. In the end, we ordered nothing but coffee. Its bitter steam rose between us, an honest smell, at least. I wrapped my palms around the cup, felt its heat pass into my bones, and remembered the pharmacy line, the gardenia perfume, the promise I'd made to myself then, never again. I looked at my boy, my almost stranger, and said softly, I love you enough to keep my mind and my name. The pearls at my throat cooled, bead by bead, settling like a verdict I could live with. When I stood, the booth's vinyl released me with a small sigh, and the world rushed back, clinks, laughter, the basil sweet air of other people's evenings. I smoothed the cardigan's hem, left, right, left, slipped the business card into my notepad, and tucked both into my purse. Email, I repeated, meeting the lawyer's eyes until he looked away. My son finally glanced up, boyish for a blink, then shuddered again. I touched my locket. Click. Lighthouse, still lit. Outside, the night had cooled to the clean smell of wet stone and taxi exhaust. I drew a peppermint from my bag, the sharp sweetness waking my mouth to truth, and felt the notepad's rectangle against my hip, evidence, plan, spine. Temporary wins are not banners, they're pebbles in your pocket, weight that keeps you from being blown off the path. I had 3, no signature, witnesses, paper trail. I walked toward the curb, pearl beneath my thumb, already tasting chamomile I'd brew at home to rinse the bitterness away. The air thinned the restaurant's perfume from my clothes, and with it, some of their power. I had not escaped the storm, I had merely opened an umbrella in time. But the sky was still dark, and somewhere behind those clouds, I could feel a new pressure building, something colder, more cunning, and aimed straight at the name on my mailbox. The first twist wasn't the papers themselves, it was the reason they gave me for them, a reason so sly it tried to wear concern like a Sunday hat. After I refused to sign, the air between us shifted, heavier than the basil and bread warmth drifting from the kitchen. My son leaned forward, elbows on the table, the cuff of his shirt brushing a bread crumb into the candle's wax pool. His eyes, so like his father's in shape, but colder in temperature, met mine for the first time all evening. It's for your own good, Mom, he said, voice pitched low, like he was offering me safety instead of a cage. I rolled one pearl between finger and thumb, feeling its cool smoothness anchor me against the rising heat under my collar. My own good, I repeated, letting the words roll slowly in my mouth, tasting the metallic aftertaste of suspicion. The lace curtain of my composure fluttered, but didn't tear. We're worried about your decision-making, he continued, glancing at Mr. Douglas as if rehearsed. The lawyer nodded in a way that felt practiced. I caught the faint whiff of his aftershave again, expensive, sharp, like a paper cut that leaves no visible wound. In that moment, I understood. This wasn't about persuading me to part with money. This was about laying groundwork, papers today, a case tomorrow. I could see the outline of it, the suggestion of incompetence, the carefully gathered evidence, the legal foot in the door to declare me unfit to manage my own life. The thought came with a flash of memory. Years ago, standing in a bank lobby with my husband, the marble floor smelling faintly of polish and ambition. He'd leaned close and murmured, "Never sign anything that makes you smaller, love." The locket pressed cool against my skin, almost like it remembered too. I smoothed the hem of my cardigan, left, before answering. I see. And what prompted this sudden concern? My tone was polite enough to carry, but sharp enough that the couple at the next table glanced over. Their wine smelled rich, heavy, like truth that's been breathing too long in the open air. You've been making questionable choices, my son said. Turning down opportunities to help the family. The word, help, landed like a sour cherry, bright on the outside, bitter at the pit. The lawyer chimed in, his voice buttered but firm. We've seen cases where, without proper planning, a person's estate gets tangled in court. We're trying to avoid that. And naturally, I said, lifting my water glass, the best way to help me avoid trouble is to strip me of the ability to make trouble. The ice tapped against the rim, a tiny applause for my own sarcasm. Mr. Douglas adjusted his tie, a nervous tick if I'd ever seen one. My son, however, didn't flinch. He was in full performance mode now, and I could almost smell the adrenaline, faintly metallic, like pennies warmed in the sun. But beneath his calm, I sensed the pressure. This wasn't the only conversation he'd had about me. Someone had planted the seed, maybe the fiancé, maybe her parents, maybe all of them over a dinner that smelled of steak and strategy. I tapped my pencil against the notepad I'd kept on the table, the cedar scent rising as I wrote a single line. Capacity, watch this thread. Then I drew a small star beside it, the symbol I use when danger and opportunity share a room. My cardigan sleeve brushed the table as I leaned back, and the fabric's soft scratch against my wrist felt grounding, even comforting. Well, I said lightly, it's good to know where the battle lines are. Neither of them smiled, and in that small silence, I realized they thought they had already won. That was the real twist. Not that they wanted my assets, but that they'd already begun writing the story of my decline, without me in the room. I rolled another pearl, slower this time. Let them think the curtain's falling. I've been on stages before, and I know how to bring a play back to life in the last act. I remembered what I had given, measured against what they tried to take, and something inside me clicked into place like a lock finding its key. The restaurant buzzed behind me, forks chiming, espresso hissing, yet all I could smell was the warm bitterness of my coffee, steady as a hand on my back. I touched my locket, cool oval, faithful moon, and rolled a single pearl between finger and thumb until my breath matched its quiet rhythm. That small ritual, left right left along my cardigan's cuff, stitched a seam through the panic. I looked at my son and saw not a judge, not a debtor, but the boy who once fell asleep against my shoulder, his hair smelling of crayons and playground dust. Memories arrived like postcards with corners singed. Halloween capes sewn by lamplight, the thread tasting metallic when I bit it. Socks warmed on the radiator. A kitchen bright with orange peel and cinnamon while a science project volcano dried on my best cookie sheet. I smoothed the table linen the way I used to smooth his cowlick, gentle, practiced, and felt the starch nip my fingertips. The pearls lay cool against my collarbone, bead by bead, like little vows I hadn't yet broken. My voice, when it came, tasted of peppermint courage from the candy in my purse. There had been lean years, the kind that smell like damp wool and coin rolls, when I skipped meat on Thursdays so he could have cleats on Saturday. I kept lists in a stenographer's pad, graphite smudging my knuckles, while the green sugar bowl with the chipped lid guarded bus fare like a dragon. Each time fear said sell, I said hold, and pressed the locket shut with that soft click that means, not today. I smoothed the hem, left, until the cardigan remembered how to be brave. Love made me generous, scarcity made me shrewd. Together they made me hard to rob. Across the table, Mr. Douglas tapped his pen, small, impatient insect, while the candle scented the air with melted wax and a thread of rosemary from someone's plate. My son's eyes slid off mine, then back, the way people look at light that's brighter than they planned for. Decision-making, he'd said, and the word still scratched like burlap. I glanced at my notepad, its cardboard back strong in my palm, and wrote, in tidy capitals, I am competent, I am kind, I am not confused. The cedar smell rose up, a small forest saying amen. I thought of the day my husband died, the antiseptic tang, the vinyl chair, the vending machine coffee with a sweetness that tasted like surrender. I wore the pearls to the hospital because they make my spine remember its length. Afterward, at home, the house smelled of chicken broth and church flowers, and I laid his jacket over the kitchen chair, fingers finding the peppermint in the pocket. That night I learned this truth. Grief is a storm, but it respects a lighthouse. I have kept mine lit, lamplight on bills, lemon on counters, lavender on the wrist. My rituals are not fussiness, they are fuel. The humiliation tonight, being offered a pen like a leash, should have buckled me. Instead it clarified me, the way a cold front pulls haze out of the air. I eased the pearls along their thread, click, click, two tiny metronomes, and my heart stepped into tempo. "It's for your own good," he'd said. But I know what my own good looks like. It smells of chamomile and fresh sheets. It sounds like the soft rip of a receipt I don't regret. It feels like the solid weight of keys in my purse. Home, car, safety, metal cool against leather. I watched my son's hands. No grease under the nails now, no ink smudges, just manicured certainty. He'd forgotten the language of making do, the one I taught him with coupons and casseroles. A wave of heat rose in my cheeks, anger, yes, but braided with sorrow that tasted like oversteeped tea. I smoothed my cuff and let the heat pass like a summer train. When it was gone, resolve remained, clean and spare as linen hung in winter air. I pressed the locket and felt its hinge whisper, "Hold." The lawyer spoke again, words buttered thin, and I let them skate by. The room smelled suddenly of scorched espresso. Someone overpulled a shot, and the bitterness pleased me. Burnt can still be honest. I wrote another line, "They think I am alone." The pencil's point dug a tiny crescent into the page, a moon to steer by. I am not alone, I thought, touching the phone in my purse, feeling the hummingbird beat of its standby life. Carol's voice, peppermint and plain sense, waited on the other side. Frank's stoic calm weighed in my memory like a paperweight on loose pages. Here is the quiet pivot no one at that table noticed. I stopped wishing he would be the boy I raised and accepted the man he chose to be. Acceptance has a smell, cold as iron, clean as rain on slate, and it washes the pleading tone out of a mother's voice. I straightened in the booth, the vinyl warm under my palms, and the pearls settled as if to say, "Now." I met my son's gaze without flinching and saw, for a blink, surprise. Not because I was loud, I wasn't, but because I was finished negotiating with a story that erased me. "Let's be clear," I said, and the words were a crisp sheet snapping on a clothesline. My throat tasted of coffee and clove. "I won't sign tonight. I won't sign ever, unless my attorney advises it. I won't be threatened with a child's affection. And I won't be shamed for keeping what I built." I smoothed the cardigan, left, right, left, and set the pen gently across the documents like a mother laying down a toy that's hurt someone. Something unclenched. The room returned, basil, glass, laughter. I became visible to myself again, a woman with a wallet she balances and a name she keeps polished like her Sunday shoes. The humiliation cooled into data, the fear condensed into strategy. I tucked the business card into my notepad, slid both into my purse, and felt the satisfying weight settle against my hip, evidence where panic used to live. When I rose to leave, the candle guttered and flared, small theater, but I accepted the applause. My pearls clicked, my locket pressed loyal, and the door let in a wash of night air that tasted of wet stone and taxi exhaust, the city's honest breath. Behind me, papers rustled. Ahead, the crosswalk blinked its calm white invitation. I pressed the car key into my palm, its teeth a little crown, and smiled at the sting. I had crossed a private border, from pleading to planning. And planning, as any woman who has paid a mortgage on time knows, smells like pencil shavings and lemon oil and ends with signatures you choose. Outside, beneath the street lamp's steady halo, I rolled one last pearl and felt my next move arrive fully formed, tidy as a list on a clean page. Tomorrow would require coordination, a phrase, and a phone call. Tonight, I would brew chamomile, fold the dish towel into a perfect square, and sleep under the quilt that remembers me. Because the next time they asked me to be small, I intended to arrive bigger, quietly, lawfully, and with witnesses. I've always believed in preparing for storms while the sky is still pretending to be blue. The night after that dinner, I began laying my sandbags. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional sigh of the old floorboards, sounds that smell, somehow, of lemon oil and comfort. I set my purse on the kitchen table, emptied it piece by piece. Notepad, pencil, business card from Mr. Douglas, the ink so fresh I swore I could still smell its varnish. My phone, still charged, screen glowing faintly like a lantern left for someone coming home late. I opened my locket, my husband's smile shining in miniature. "You'd tell me to keep receipts," I murmured. And so I would. I smoothed the cuff of my cardigan, left, right, left, then turned to my phone. Before I'd left for the dinner, Carol and I had agreed on the phrase. Not help, not call the police, too loud, too quick. Our signal was, "Could you bring me that book I lent you?" Harmless on the surface, freighted underneath. I'd asked her to be on standby, and now, I decided, it was time to test the bridge we'd built. I tapped her number, let it ring once, and when she answered with her usual, "Hey, sugar," I said it. "Could you bring me that book I lent you?" She didn't ask which book. She didn't ask when. She simply replied, "Got it." I could hear the faint clink of her spoon in her peppermint tea, calm, deliberate. She would call my cousin Frank, the retired police officer with shoulders like doorframes and a voice that could make a room listen without raising its volume. While she worked her side, I worked mine. I photographed every page of the documents Mr. Douglas had tried to slide under my hand. The paper's smooth weight was cold against my fingertips, the way marble feels in a courthouse lobby. My phone's camera clicked softly, like knitting needles picking up a dropped stitch. I sent the images to a new email account I'd created that morning, one only I knew about, the address scribbled on a sticky note hidden inside my grandmother's recipe book. Then, I sat with my notepad and wrote out the evening, time, place, who said what, even the way the candlelight had caught the lawyer's teapin. Details are currency in rooms where truth is up for auction. The cedar scent from the pencil shavings braided itself with the chamomile steam rising from my cup. Calm work, deliberate work. The clock ticked toward midnight, the sound steady as a metronome. I rolled one pearl between my fingers, feeling its perfect surface. That's when the headlights swept across my front window and a shadow crossed the lace curtain. My heart beat once, hard, but it was only Frank's truck pulling into the curb. The driver's door opened, and in came Frank, broad, unhurried, still smelling faintly of the leather holster he no longer wore. "Evening," he said, like it was any other night. He sat at the table, eyes scanning the spread of papers and my notes. I couldn't help overhearing some of Carol's concerns. His gaze slid to the business card, then to me. "You're right to be cautious. This smells like elder financial coercion." The word elder stung, but I kept my chin level. "And what would you do about it?" I asked. "Document. Secure. Notify," he said, counting each word off on fingers that had once cuffed men twice his size. "And don't tip your hand." The advice tasted like strong coffee, bitter, bracing. I nodded, tucked the photographs back into my phone, and smoothed the hem of my cardigan again. "Then let's start with the first two tonight." Frank smiled, a slow, careful smile. "You've already started." By the time he left, the papers were locked in my desk, the photos were stored in 3 separate places, and the house smelled of lavender from the dab I'd pressed to my wrists. Outside, the night was calm. Inside, I had my sandbags in place. And if my son thought he'd ridden me into the final chapter of his little plan, he was going to find out I'd already started a sequel. Frank arrived quicker than a rumor and named the game out loud, turning their private pressure into public light. The restaurant's air was thick with butter and basil, a cozy fog that wanted to soften hard edges. My pearls stayed cool against my skin, tiny moons keeping their own weather. I smoothed the cuff of my navy cardigan, left, right, left, while Mr. Douglas angled the pen toward me again, the metal catching candlelight like a lure flicked over dark water. Then the door sighed and let in a square of night that smelled of wet pavement and hot brakes. Frank's silhouette filled it, broad and patient. I touched my locket, cool oval, familiar hinge, and felt steadier just hearing the leather creak of his shoes, a sound like a porch swing that has seen storms and stayed. He didn't bark or loom. He simply slid into the booth beside me, shoulders a quiet wall, voice warm as fresh coffee. "Evening," he said, nodding at my son and the lawyer. I rolled one pearl between finger and thumb, click, click, while the espresso machine hissed behind us like a cat who knows its mind. Mr. Douglas introduced himself again, aftershave sharp as paper. "We're finalizing some documents," he said, resting his fingertips on the top sheet like a man blessing bread. I inhaled rosemary from a nearby plate, taste buds waking, and smoothed the hem of my cardigan, the knit leaving its calm little ridges against my wrist. Frank glanced at the letterhead, his breath slow, steady, the way cops breathe when facts will be their only weapon. He slid a card from his wallet, the leather smelled faintly of saddle soap, and placed it beside the lawyer's, edges squared. "Family friend," he said, retired. Before you go further, are you aware this arrangement could look like elder financial coercion? I touched the locket, click, and watched the lawyer's smile lose half a watt. A couple at the next booth paused mid-fork. The clatter of a spoon on china rang clear as a bell. Public has a scent, citrus from someone's martini, warm linen from the napkins, and it changes men who planned for shadows. My son's knee started bouncing, rattling the ice in his water so the lemon bobbed like a nervous buoy. I rolled my pearl, 1, 2, and kept my mouth soft, my spine steel. Coercion? Hardly. Mr. Douglas's pen tapped, a small insect against paper. Frank didn't touch it, he touched the menu instead, thick stock, embossed, like a man choosing between pastas while he set out chess pieces. She's told you she'll seek independent counsel? He asked. The basil in the air leaned sweet, my notepad on the table looked suddenly holy as a psalm book. Yes, I said, letting chamomile memory wash my voice, warm and apple sweet though there was no tea in sight. I smoothed the cardigan's cuff, left, left, and added, and I won't be signing anything tonight. My pearl clicked softly, my own applause in miniature. Frank turned to the waiter, who hovered with professional invisibility and a towel that smelled faintly of bleach and lemons. Sir, he said, tone gentle, would you mind noting on the bill that no legal documents were executed at this table? The waiter nodded, grateful to be given a dignified errand. That towel might as well have been a flag. The lawyer tried for breezy. We're only expressing concern about capacity, he said, and the word capacity landed in my mouth like an aspirin, chalky, reluctantly swallowed. I placed my palm over my locket, felt its round truth under my skin, and smoothed the linen tablecloth with my other hand until the weave impressed itself gently in my fingertips. Capacity, Frank repeated, friendly as a Sunday usher, isn't assessed by surprise dinners and pens. He smiled at me, and the room smelled suddenly of orange peel and trust. It's assessed by people who do that job, in private, without threats about grandchildren. At grandchildren, my son's jaw flicked. The lemon in his glass bumped the ice again, a nervous metronome. I rolled a pearl, click, and kept breathing. A woman 2 tables over, bracelets chiming like teaspoons, looked straight at me with the kind of sympathy I usually dislike. Tonight it smelled like vanilla and clean laundry and did no harm. I straightened, pearls settling into their familiar constellation, and rested my fingers on my notepad's cardboard back. Even the cedar scent of the pencil shavings felt like allies assembling. Mr. Douglas cleared his throat, aftershave turning sharp again. Perhaps we've gotten off on the wrong foot. Frank tilted his head, the old badge in his wallet not flashed but present, like thunder you can't quite place. Put both feet back, he said pleasantly. Email her counsel and schedule a proper meeting. Tonight is dinner. I smoothed my cuff, left, left, and let that sentence set like a good custard. My son tried one last performance, voice low and bruised. Mom, we're trying to protect you. The garlic-sweet air didn't cover the tin in his tone. I touched the locket, and my late husband's smile, the size of a fingernail and as steady as a lighthouse, kept me from drowning in old wishes. Then start, I said softly, by respecting me. The pearl under my thumb cooled, as if it had waited years to hear that exact line. Silence arrived, then broke into the ordinary clink and hum of other people's evenings. The waiter set down coffee, bitter steam, honest smell, and a printed bill that noted precisely what Frank had asked. The paper was warm from the machine, almost buttery. I held it like proof of weather on a day the sky pretended blue. We stood. The booth released its little sigh. My cardigan brushed my wrist with woolly reassurance. Frank's presence was a sturdy coat over my shoulders. Carol's unseen listening on the other end of a phone felt like a hand at my back. I tucked the lawyer's card behind mine in the notepad, edges aligned, and smoothed the cover flat, habit, anchor, prayer. Outside, the night met us with the clean taste of damp stone and thin moonlight. I breathed in, peppermint sweet from the candy I unwrapped with practiced fingers, and felt the notepad's rectangle thud softly against my hip. Record, witness, spine. Behind us, voices rose and fell, a tide that would tell this little story to itself before dessert. We parted at the curb, Frank to his truck, me to my small ship of a car. My pearls rested like calm stars, my locket clicked once, a compass finding north. As I gripped the wheel, leather warm and faintly citrus from the old orange peel in the console, I smoothed the seam, left, right, left, and told myself the truth. We had turned on a light, but people who prefer the dark don't surrender after one flip of a switch. Tomorrow would smell of printer ink and fresh coffee. There would be emails, a call to an attorney of my own, and a strengthening of locks no one could see. And somewhere, I knew, a harder wind was rising, carrying the cold breath of a plan that hadn't finished with me yet. The walk back to my car was slow on purpose. I wanted the night air to rinse the scent of basil and betrayal from my clothes before I stepped into my own home. The sidewalk smelled faintly of wet stone and hot asphalt cooling under a reluctant breeze. My pearls lay cool against my collarbone, their familiar weight reminding me that not everything precious can be pawned. By the time I slid into the driver's seat, the quiet hum of the car felt like a held breath. I smoothed the steering wheel's leather seam, left, right, left, before pulling into traffic. My headlights carved 2 straight ribbons into the road ahead, but my mind kept replaying the scene in the booth. My son's face, tight as a drawstring bag. The lawyer's pen, gleaming like a trap disguised as silverware. And Frank's voice, low and certain, calling their bluff without raising the table stakes. At home, the house greeted me with the lemon and lavender calm I'd left it in. I set my purse on the counter, next to the green sugar bowl with the chipped lid. That little bowl has held quarters for laundromats, bus fare for job interviews, and coins saved for birthday cakes. Tonight it held my phone, screen down, as if keeping it safe from the residue of the evening. I made chamomile tea, letting the steam rise into my face like a blessing I didn't have to earn. The scent, apple sweet, grassy, steadied me. I sat at the kitchen table with my notepad, the cardboard back firm as truth, and wrote a single sentence: "They think fear will work." The cedar from my pencil shavings curled upward, mixing with the tea's warmth. I smoothed the hem of my cardigan, left, left, and underlined the sentence twice. When I called Carol, she didn't bother with greetings. "I heard enough from Frank," she said, voice brisk but edged with pride. "Good for you, hun. You didn't give them an inch." "No," I agreed, "but they'll be back." My voice didn't tremble. She exhaled slowly, and I could almost smell the peppermint steam from her mug. "Then we make sure you're ready." We talked for an hour, about tightening my accounts, reviewing my will, documenting every conversation. She told me she'd seen this pattern before. A family member wrapping greed in the soft shawl of concern. Her words were bitter but true, like unsweetened cocoa. Later, as I washed my cup, the warm water ran over my fingers like a promise to myself. I hung the dish towel neatly, edges lined, because dignity lives in details. I touched my locket, cool and steady, then rolled a pearl between finger and thumb until my breath matched its rhythm. Sleep came slowly, tugging at me like a cautious child. My dreams were scattered, snippets of voices, the glint of a pen, the click of my locket closing. But beneath it all ran a single, steady awareness: they hadn't given up. They'd regroup, reframe, return. And the next time, I would not just be ready, I would be waiting. The moment snapped like a dry twig. They pressed, I held, and the room learned which of us would bend. The booth felt smaller, as if a leather had drawn a tighter belt around our ribs. Garlic and roasted rosemary crowded the air until I could almost taste the sheen of oil on my tongue. I set my palm on the linen, feeling the fine weave, order you can touch, and rolled one pearl between finger and thumb until my pulse followed its small, dignified beat. My locket lay cool against the hollow of my throat, a coin of calm I refused to spend. I smoothed my cardigan cuff, left, left, and looked at my son as though we were the only 2 people in the city. "Enough," I said, quiet as a church step. The word landed with the clean click of a latch. Mr. Douglas's pen hovered, a dragonfly above dark water. The candle put a shine on its clip that pretended to be invitation and read like threat. I slid my notepad closer, the cardboard back steady as backbone, and wrote one neat line: refused signature after pressure, witnesses present. The cedar scent of the pencil rose, cut through basil, and gave me my air back. My son tried the plaintive tone, the one that used to melt me like butter on hot toast. "Mom, don't make this harder." His glass knocked the lemon slice again, a small, predictable tide, I watched it bob and told myself a truth as simple as salt. Pity can be a burglar's mask. I lifted my water and sipped until the metal taste of anger softened to something like tea left too long, a reminder, not a meal. Frank remained a quiet mountain at my side, the leather of his wallet giving that faint saddle soap smell when he shifted. She said her choice, he murmured, voice warm as coffee left on a stove to keep company. Tonight is dinner. The lawyer exhaled through his nose, the aftershave sharpened, paper fine. Then you'll regret this, my son muttered, the words dull as a pocket knife that still knows how to cut. Heads turned, bracelets chimed, a fork stalled midair, public enough to register, not enough to rescue his pride. I let the humiliation bloom and pass the way heat does after opening an oven door, sharp, then gone if you don't lean in. I smoothed my cuff, left, left, and answered in a voice I keep for bank managers and bullies. I regret nothing that protects my name. The pearls settled like a small constellation finding its place. Mr. Douglas stacked the papers with an efficiency that smelled of toner and closed doors. We'll be in touch, he said. How brave, I answered, to threaten me by email. A chuckle rolled from the bar like a soft tide. I did not look to see whose. The waiter appeared with an instinct for weather, towel folded, citrus riding the air from a tray of waters. Everything all right here? He asked. I met his eyes, kind and busy, and tipped my head toward the bill. Perfect, thank you. And if it's not too much trouble, please note that no documents were signed. He gave the smallest nod, a man who's learned when paperwork is a life raft, and vanished into steam and plates. I touched my locket, click, and felt my husband's tiny smile hold steady. My son stood too fast, the booth sighed. He smoothed his sleeve, that old tell, then slammed back into stillness. We were offering help, he said, voice low, shame salted. You were offering custody, I corrected, tasting the barest edge of peppermint from the candy I kept for courage. Of me. The word drew itself straight as a ruler. Around us, the soundtrack of other evenings resumed, cutlery, laughter, a sigh of espresso, life making room for our little shipwreck and then moving on. When the bill came, warm from the printer, I paid without theater, the card cool as a coin under my fingers. The receipt's ink still smelled faintly of plastic and proof. I tucked it behind my lawyer's card in the notepad, evidence layered like clothes for weather, and zipped my purse with the satisfying sound of a seam finished true. I rose, my pearls touching bone like punctuation you can feel. At the door, my son hissed, soft enough for theater, loud enough for punishment, you'll never see her again. Strawberry shampoo, my granddaughter's scent in memory, flashed sweet and unbearably young in my nose. I felt the floor tilt. I caught myself on the rail, cool brass under palm. Then I smoothed my cuff, left, left, until balance returned and answered so gently the words could cut without spilling blood. Love is not ransom, I said. Don't make it one. His face flinched. Mr. Douglas looked at the floor, where men look when they've found the edge of their brief. Outside, the night rinsed me in wet stone air and taxi heat. Frank touched my elbow, a respectful harbor, and then let go. You did fine, he said. You did precise. Precision has a smell, pencil, ink, the lemon of a counter wiped clear. I breathed it in until my shoulders unhooked from my ears. Across the street, a bakery shuttered. Warm sugar drifted toward us on a sigh, and for a heartbeat I felt 16 again, daring and broke and unwilling to be bought. I sat in my car and let the steering wheel's leather seam meet my thumbs, left, left, until calm found its groove. Through the windshield, the restaurant glowed the way stages do after curtain, too bright, suddenly small. I tucked the receipt deeper into my notepad, the cardboard back pressing a square of certainty against my palm. The locket cooled, a moon set for travel. The pearls rested like well-trained stars. We had reached the storm's eye. Papers unsigned. Threats spoken aloud where the room could hear them. The roof had held. But storms circle back when they think the house is tired. I tasted chamomile in imagination, apple sweet and steady, and turned the key. Tomorrow I would make calls, change locks you can't see, and begin the quiet work of teaching a story to tell the truth. 3 weeks have passed since that night, and the air in my house feels different, lighter, sharper, like the moment after rain when the pavement still smells warm but the clouds have moved on. The green sugar bowl with its chipped lid sits where it always has, guarding nothing more than a few dollar bills for the paperboy, but I notice it more now. Maybe because I've decided no one gets to shake it like a piggy bank again. My granddaughter hasn't called. I don't blame her. Children are little sailboats. They go where the wind pushes, and she can't yet tell if it's a storm or a safe harbor she's headed toward. I keep a photo of her in my notepad, pressed flat like a flower, and when I look at it I can almost smell the strawberry shampoo and pencil shavings from her backpack. I smooth the edge of the picture, left, right, left, before tucking it back between cardboard and paper, safe from hands that might misuse it. Carol has been a constant presence, her visits smelling of peppermint tea and the faint lavender of her laundry soap. She's the one who reminds me patience is not the same as doing nothing. It's the strongest weapon you've got, she says, sipping from a mug that has a hairline crack like my favorite chamomile cup. Let them think you're still. Still water runs deep. Frank has been just as steady. He's helped me set up protections on my accounts, the faint plastic smell of new debit cards mixing with the fresh ink of notarized papers. We met at the credit union on a rainy morning, the place smelled of wet coats and toner, and by the time we left, my accounts were locked up tighter than a winter church. I rolled a pearl between finger and thumb the whole way home, the rhythm matching the windshield wipers. One quiet afternoon, I sat at the kitchen table with the lace curtain brushing my arm and went through my will. The locket lay open beside me, my husband's smile like a compass needle pointing to calm. I wrote down names, crossed out others, adjusted what needed adjusting. Every decision felt like stitching a quilt, pulling some pieces together, leaving others in the scrap basket. By evening, I'd sewn a legal patchwork no one could unravel without my say-so. There have been moments of loneliness, sharp, sudden things that taste of oversteeped tea. When I pass a mirror now, it returns a woman whose spine remembers its length. The pearls sit like a small constellation she navigates by, and the locket's hinge clicks the way a compass needle settles, here. I brew chamomile in the evening, the mug warming my palm, and I smooth my cuff, left, right, left, less to calm myself than to thank the hands that carried me this far. As for my son, the distance stays, a fence, not a wall. Fences can grow gates. I picture my granddaughter sometimes, the scent of strawberry shampoo and pencil shavings riding in with her as she runs across my rug, the quilt rippling under her small weight. If she comes, I'll have ginger cookies ready and the same boundaries I keep for everyone else. Kindness on a tray, keys in my pocket, papers in order. Love is not ransom. If anyone asks again, I'll answer with the same sentence, smooth as linen pulled tight. Family is a circle, not a choke chain. What did I learn? That generosity without boundaries is an advertisement for wolves. That silence can be tactical, not timid. That a notepad and a level voice beat a spectacle every day ending in Y. That I am allowed to protect the woman who kept the lights on, even if the people she lit them for forget the cost of electricity. The house smells like lemon and lavender tonight, ordinary holiness. I touch my locket and hear my husband's smile in the hinge. I roll a pearl and count a beat ahead. I won't pretend there isn't an ache. It tastes like tea left too long, harmless but honest. Still, grace has its own aftertaste, a clean, rain-on slate finish. I set 2 cups on the shelf each night now, an invitation folded into habit. One is for me, apple sweet and steady. The other is for whatever comes, apology, laughter, a small hand knocking, or simply peace. I smooth my cardigan, left, right, left, turn off the kitchen light, and let the house breathe. If they try again, I'll answer with counsel and quiet paperwork. If love returns, I'll open the door. Either way, I keep my name polished, my keys within reach, and my dignity where it belongs, around my neck like pearls, cool and bright, reflecting enough light to see the path forward.